Hello. Let's go over the Lacerate of HAEMORRHAGE Gladiator. Gladiator is the class that is often overlooked, rightfully so. It's not that great when compared to more popular ascendancies. It is, however, good in bleed builds. Arena Challenger and Outmatch and Outlast passives are here to improve the character's overall damage, survivability, and mobility. Blood in the Eyes maims your enemies, increases your damage, and chance of causing bleed, which exceeds 100% anyway, while Gratuitous Violence grants more damage, and causes bleeding enemies to explode on kill, which is much needed in this short-range melee attack build. Allocate Crimson Dance. You will now be able to apply 8 bleed instances on an enemy instead of 1. Even with bleed damage cut in half and no extra damage during movement, it's still beneficial, especially with Ryslatha's Coil Belt, Volatility Support Gem and high attack speed. Crimson Dance allows for 8 bleed instances, but it will automatically filter out the best bleeds. It doesn't take into account the order in which they were applied. That's why high attack speed, long bleed duration, and high variance of damage rolls are so good in this build. Lacerate of HAEMORRHAGE is the new addition to this archetype. It's possibly the strongest bleed-oriented skill with its immense bonuses to bleed damage. It's not a complex skill. For more attack speed, use Blood Rage and Ancestral Protector. Attack speed is quite important here. The defenses are very basic, it's mostly maximum life with armor and block chance. We've also added some evasion and spell suppression chance that can be found mostly on gear pieces. It only lacks quick live recovery as you can't leech from bleed, but we've patched it up with Life Flask. The explosions are great, but it's still a melee build, so the clear speed is not particularly great. Single target damage depends heavily on your weapon. It is good enough even on a budget. We've tried to make this build as inexpensive as possible. It employs mostly rare items, but we will include cheap uniques that can be used as well. Keep in mind that this build is very straightforward and all the items listed below can be replaced with cheap rares. Ryslatha's Coil is possibly the closest we have to a mandatory unique item. The Bringer of Rain is a cheap option for the primary DPS setup. It's good for a budget version, quickly becoming replaceable as you start dealing with the endgame content. Jack, the Axe, is a decent pick for the weapon slot. Grants increased life leech, bleed chance, and much more bleed damage. The Surrender is one of the best shields for this build due to the instant life recovery that we desperately need. It grants very high defensive utility and the Reckoning skill for some extra DPS. It's very expensive. Make sure you have a very high block chance before equipping it. Lionize Remorse is a budget-friendly option. It grants a very high bonus to maximum life but no elemental resistances and no offensive utility. You can easily replace it with a rare shield with something like spell suppression chance. Ryslatha's Coil is the best belt for any bleed build with a Crimson Dance, by a long shot. It extends the upper limit of your physical damage hits. If you're using Herald of Purity, which you should, you can consider equipping Circle of Guilt. It can increase the Herald's buff effect in your damage. Hemophilia, very good and inexpensive option for the glove slot. Hemophilia grants extra AoE by making slain enemies explode, similar to Gratuitous Violence passive. Most of the items should be rare if you want to reach a 100% spell suppression chance. Besides life and resistances, these should also contain evasion and armor. You won't need any accuracy or crit mods. Attributes should not be an issue as well. For more damage, seek physical damage, damage over time, and dot multiplier. The helmet should provide a lot of maximum life and cause enemies to take increased physical damage. If it's an evasion base, it should grant you some spell suppression. For Eldritch mods, look for Vulnerability Curse effect and increased duration of ailments on enemies. Rare Axe can be potentially the best in the slot with its high base physical DPS, however, it will be also the most expensive option. You can seek many bleeding related mods and ones to increase your physical damage over time. A good body armor should grant you a lot of maximum life, spell suppression, armor, resistances, and life regeneration. For Eldritch mods, you can get maximum resistances, chance to fortify on hit, and block chance or armor. You can also use unique body armor such as Belly of the Beast, Carcass Jack, or Duresso's Defiance. On boots, just aim for movement speed with high defensive stats on a preferably strength base, for extra armor. For Eldritch mods, get one to make bleed deal damage faster and action speed. Using a rare amulet with attributes is a good choice. Add to that some stats from the list. You can replace it with generic Yule Nettle's Vow or Ashes of the Stars if you can afford them. The regular life, resistances, and some utility mods like attributes or reduced mana cost of skills should be sufficient on a ring. You can craft the prefix that reduces the mana cost of skills. Gloves, preferably spiked gloves for extra melee damage, or gloves with evasion for suppression. Other than that, you shall aim for high defensive stats and attack speed. For Eldritch mods, get physical damage over time multiplier and suppression chance. Jewels should provide extra maximum life and bonus damage over time for bleeding. Damaging ailments deal damage faster, may be the best one if your attack speed is high enough. Fuel the Fight will take care of your mana sustain issue, while Feed the Fury will aid your life recovery. Any suffix notable is good, but Smite the Weak is the best one. You can select flask-oriented or physical.medium cluster jewels. Replica Witchfire Brew should stay on most of the time if you have one, so seeking generic flask effect duration mods is recommended in such case. Replica Witchfire Brew curses nearby enemies with vulnerability, which saves you a gem socket and a button to press. The extra evasion and smoke cloud will be a good addition if you have some extra evasion on your gear pieces, and Jade Flask. Use a jade, granite, quartz, silver, and life flask if you can. Their suffixes should increase your armor, evasion, attack, and movement speed. Lacerate of Hemorrhage is your primary DPS skill. It's a swift melee AoE attack. The Hemorrhage variant has lower damage and less AoE, but has higher attack speed and deals more damage with bleeding. Link it with melee physical damage, multi-strike, brutality, volatility, and chance to bleed support gems. Ancestral Protector summons a totem granting you more attack speed. Deploy it whilst fighting bosses. Link it with life tap and maim support gems. Vulnerability is the recommended curse for this build. It can also be gained from the Replica Witchfire Brew or Corrupted Gloves implicit. Leap Slam is the recommended movement skill used in this build. You can instead use Shield Charge, which is faster but won't allow you to jump over cliffs and other obstacles. Link it with Life Tap and faster attacks support gems. Pride is the default aura for melee physical builds. The enemies nearby take more physical damage. Determination adds and increases armor to take less physical hit damage. Herald of Purity grants you more physical damage and creates minions that can be used to divert the enemy's attention from you. Link these three with Enlighten to reserve less mana. With War Banner on, enemies near you take increased physical damage. Blood Rage grants increased attack speed, Frenzy Charge Generation, and Life Leech. Enduring Cry quickly regenerates some of your life. It has no cast time with Call to Arms, so set it up as your movement key. Link these three with enhanced support to increase their quality. Molten Shell forms a protective barrier that absorbs a portion of incoming damage for some time, or until it can take no more. Link it with Cast when damage taken to cast it automatically, and increased duration to make it last longer. If you still have enough mana, or if you're using a specific Owl's Uprising, you may be able to fit Malevolence into this build. We've included Malevolence as an optional pick as it's very hard to fit it in. Kill all the bandits in Act 2 and be rewarded with 2 passive skill points. For a major god, pick Brine King. If you don't get stunned that often and you're immune to freeze, you can pick any other god, they're all good. It's up to your individual preference or the type of content you're running the most. For the minor god, select Abarath, which reduces ignite duration on you, or Soul of Shikari if your chaos resistance is low. All the other minor gods are fine too. The passive skill tree provides maximum life, physical damage over time, bleed damage, axe damage, block chance, armor, and reservation efficiency. Your keystones are Crimson Dance, Call to Arms, and Resolute Technique. For masteries, get 50 extra life and 30% of skill cost is shifted to life as life masteries, increased bleed duration and dot multiplier per endurance charge as bleed masteries, faster bleeding for an axe mastery, reservation efficiency as mana mastery, chance to block attacks per chance to block on a shield as shield mastery, and more physical attack damage as physical mastery. And that is all there is to say about this build. A great start for the next league, undoubtedly. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.